record. So welcome, everybody. So this is the first of many webinars we hope to bring you with regards to some specific topics that we know everyone is struggling with. And one of those things that is super important is the documentation. So this particular webinar is all about the documentation. We're at the start of the year, so we really feel like this is the perfect opportunity for kind of get everything in line with regards to compliancy and the documentation that you should have. So let me quickly kind of share my screen out. So let me do that really quickly. And let's share that. So let me get the presentation going. So it looks like, do you guys all see my screen? Let me stop the share. Let me do it one more time, guys. Let me just make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Now you are all muted by default. So just so that you know, you are muted. So obviously we're going to be talking about documentation you must have as a small business owner. So we definitely want to just get that all in line for the new year. So let's move forward. So let me kick to the next campaign. So what do I mean by documentation? So do you all see that screen? Unmute yourself so you can chat with me.
I see it.
You see it, Sam? Do you see it in full screen?
I see it in full screen.
Okay, beautiful. Let me get up to that screen and let me advance my slides. Okay, so what do I mean by documentation? So first of all, there's the physical kind, right? That's the bank statements, the payables and receivables, tax returns, all your expenses, your policies and your procedures, all the legal stuff, the stuff that you can physically get your hands on right now. Now, I'm hoping that all of you have that in line, like you have an idea of where all of that sits. So that's the physical kind of documentation that you should kind of be including when you're putting together your plan on how you're going to track. Then there's the virtual kind. Now, this is the kind that we truly, it's all in the cloud, right? It could be your cloud-based accounting system. It could be emails. It could be your passwords. It's vendors that you work with so that you access it all via the internet. Okay. Then there's the documentation that you don't know about. And that's the documentation that I care about. That's what this is all about. It's about the documentation that I need you to get in line so that we can straighten out any issues. But it's all of that account information, whether it be your domain, your online accounts, your login credentials for your email and any software that you use. It could be your equipment credentials. So anything that truly has some type of configuration in it is what we're going to be talking about. So this is the section that I really want to kind of focus on today, just because I think that you have a handle on the first two, the physical kind and the virtual kind. But it's all that other stuff that's kind of unknown for us. Okay. Now, the reason that this was all brought to my attention is the fact that we had a couple of clients that have joined us recently, and it's a little frustrating because when we establish relationships with new clients, we have to kind of dig down into what they have for accounts. We keep track of that for them, right? So the most important thing for us to do when we start a relationship with a client is actually to create that list. So here's the goal. This is the goal for today, is that we kind of get an understanding of actually how we're going to obtain the data. Okay. So step number one is let's create a list of the documents you know you can put your hands on right now. Okay, those are all the stuff that's physically in your office somewhere. I'd like to say they're in a secure location. So let's just assume that everything that's important is in a file cabinet, a fire safe location, maybe a safety deposit box. So get a list of all those documents that you know you could potentially need in an emergency. Okay, then we're going to create a list of all the online stuff. So in your day-to-day, what is it that you guys access online? You have to go to a website to get access to. And all of that requires logins and passwords. And who has those login and passwords? Okay, so that's one of the things that we're most concerned about, is that a lot of our clients have a slew of online accounts. You may have multiple employees and our concern is that they have credentials that they're accessing your information with that you don't have, right? So we need to be able to get an understanding of your online vendors, your account, your software programs, and the employees that access them, okay? Then I need you to create a list of all of the equipment that you have in your offices that you know has some type of configuration in it. Because if it has a configuration, there's a login and password to it, okay? And we want to make sure whether that is your printers, your routers, your firewalls, your credit card machines, anything that communicates with the outside world or has some type of configuration in it, it's stuff that we need to advance through. Okay. All right. Then once we have the list, we need to then determine the who. Okay. So in order for us to gain control of it all, we need to determine exactly who has access to it. The physical documents, ultimately, that should just be you and a small group of admin staff. So you should be able to put your hands on your EIN, your tax returns. You should be able to put your hands on the documents that you require, any certifications that you hold. You should be able to physically put your hands on that. Virtual documents, that could potentially be your entire team. So if you have an accounting system, everyone accesses it, we want to write that down. Write down who has access to your virtual stuff. If it's email, who has control over the email? Is there a way that if you have an employee that leaves, can you immediately lock them down? Is that a possibility? So we definitely want to make sure that you understand who has access to your data virtually. Okay, that is one of the biggest risks we all get with regards to the compliancy side of things. So we want to make sure that you have control over it. Okay, now all the other stuff. Okay, so here's our concern. Is a lot of you may have had a vendor do it for you, like us, right? You may have us, we create accounts for our clients all the time. It may be a friend. You had a friend create and purchase your domain for you. It may be a family member that did it, where they had the knowledge that you didn't, and they created the account for you. Or it could be an employee. So we have clients that have, dozens of employees, and they rely on their employees to create accounts for them, just based on having to do their job, right? Whether that be maybe a Staples account where they're buying their office supplies. It could be where you purchased your domain. It could be any slew of accounts that are created on your company's behalf. And that's where we're struggling with regards to making sure that you have that documentation in place. Okay. So now that we understand the who, I need to be able to safeguard the list. Okay. So we have the list. We have who accesses all of that documentation. And now we need to know where is the doc, where is it? And it's time to kind of get it all together and gather it so that if in an emergency and you had to access stuff, or you had to lock somebody out, or you had to prevent access to a bank account, or you had to prevent them from charging on a credit card, where is that information located? Okay. So next up is truly both the physical and the virtual stuff should be pretty easy to gather. Okay. The concern is the missing documents and the data that others have. Okay. Now, one of the scenarios that we ran through is we had a client that had a beautiful website. The website was gorgeous. And when I do my quarterly business reviews or my technology business reviews with this client, I always take a look at the websites. I just verify that it's working, and I kind of take a look and I navigate around. And during that particular QBR, when I visited the website, it was no longer accessible. It said the website was not there. It gave me a blank page. So when I had talked to this client, I said, okay, do you understand that is there a reason why your website is down? Like, why is your website not working? And they're in the medical profession. So she's like, I don't know. I haven't been to it in a little bit, but patients do have the ability to schedule appointments through the website. So I really haven't been on it. Come to find out, they had hired a vendor years ago to purchase the domain for them. And They didn't know where that was. They just knew that they paid this vendor every year a fee to keep that website up and live. And the vendor closed business. COVID prevented them from continuing their business, and they basically closed and said, hey, peace out. They never notified the client. The client had no idea. If it wasn't for me kind of reviewing the website, they would have had no idea. Now, we attempted to determine where this company went. Their website was down. We did some kind of a deep dive and realized that they're truly closed. They closed. And their domain was purchased through GoDaddy. Now, for anybody that has ever worked with GoDaddy, their security is pretty high. So when I contacted GoDaddy on behalf of this client, and we had the client on a three-way call, and they weren't even on the account. So the domain was not in the client's name. So because it was not in the client's name, this company did it technically for the client, but never put the client's name on the account. There was no way for us to get that domain back. So unfortunately, the only way around it, I filed a complaint, I filed a request, I did all of the back end work with GoDaddy to try to get possession of the domain on behalf of the client. And unfortunately, there was no making it happen. We did file some legal paperwork with GoDaddy. That takes months and months and months, and the client's like, I can't be down. So we ended up having to purchase a completely separate domain for them, which means all of their marketing material had to change. So the moral of the story is that the client relied on the vendor to purchase the domain and maintain the website on their behalf. And at least make sure that anytime anyone does anything for you, and you instinctively, you're going to have things happen that you're going to have to rely on others to do work for you. And we're good with that. We have no problem. I don't want to discourage you from allowing your staff to do stuff for you. But you want to make sure that it's always being done where your business name or your physical name is attached to the account. So that if something happens and that person goes away, or that company goes away, or you fire that company, that you can still maintain what technically is already yours. Okay, so unfortunately, it did take some time. They had to repurchase that completely different domain, and all of the marketing material had to be switched over. So, so just to give you an example of how that can turn really ugly really quickly. And unfortunately, the client didn't even think about it. They're like, we hired them to do it. Like, we hired this company to buy, to purchase the domain and make sure the website was up to date, not ever realizing that the information was truly it didn't belong to us. So there was a little bit of frustration. So here's what I need, and this is going to be painful. We don't sugarcoat it. It's going to be painful sometimes to make the calls. So anytime throughout the month of January, when you're thinking about, hey, I have an account with this person. I log into it. I got two other staff that log into it. I wonder what their credentials are. Like, does the account belong to me? Is it in your name or your company's name? And is there more than one person? So it's super important to kind of look at all of your online documentation, all the accounts that you access, and just make sure that you're on the account as business owner. Okay. And anytime you ask somebody to do something for you, be sure that they're doing it on your behalf. So we're going to take some time. And we're going to actually think of all of those people that truly have done stuff for us. And we're going to be able to reach out and say, hey, I need login credentials. If nothing more, make sure that you have the credentials to log into the accounts. Okay. It's going to be a little painful at start. I won't lie. I won't lie. It's going to be a little painful. So here's it. You're going to call anyone who may have access to your information. Okay. Now I'm going to give you this list. Now, this list is kind of a basic list. It's kind of things that I know we've experienced firsthand because we've personally experienced trying to gather the information. One is your technology company. Now, that could be us, right? That could be us. And I'll talk about that in a minute. It could be your website company, and your website is also has a domain. And so there is a difference. Your domain, which is the www.whateveris.com, that is purchased, could be someplace different than where you're having your website done. So if you have a domain, that's going to be with a domain holder, a registrar, and then you could have a website company that kind of helps you link the two. So it could be potentially two different companies. And then you have your network, your internet service provider, which is what that ISP stands for. So your internet service provider, your network equipment, if you have a router that sits anywhere in your office or offices, that has configuration on it. It gives us the ability to control your internet access, right? So anytime you have a wireless connectivity, there's going to be login and credentials. Who has them? Who can control it? If you don't have those credentials, we're going to gather those credentials, okay? So we want to make sure that you are gaining access to that information, okay? Any vendor you can possibly think of that you have created an account for, okay? So any type of login credentials, any account, it could be your accounting system. I recently had a client whose accounting system was through a third-party company. The third-party company was charging them a ridiculous amount of money to be kind of in the middle. And we struggled a little bit because why, right? We want to save the client money. So we looked at it and said, look, let's just pull that out. Like we don't need to have a middleman. Let's just pull that out. And unfortunately, when we went to do that, there was some proprietary stuff happening, and we struggled with getting that account out of that company's name and into our client's name. So we want to make sure that if you're creating accounts or establishing relationships, that you're doing it with where you have control over it. Okay. Any employee who sets up accounts for you. Okay. So for some of us, that's a lot. You know, we have employees that do that, and it could be anything from purchasing office supplies, and they need to purchase them online. And they may have a whole slew of those, right? They could have a whole slew of accounts that others have created for them. It could be a family or a friend who set up an account for you. So let's just kind of go through that list mentally, and let's make sure that we are kind of jotting things down with regards to who has access to what. Okay. All right. Now, what do you say? Because you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call them and you're going to ask them for your credentials. Now, here's the tricky part. You may have vendors that will not give you information. Okay, so we have to document that. We have to be able to say, look, I have an account with, you know, Charter, and obviously they own the equipment, so it's their equipment. They're not going to give us the credentials, but I know consciously that, hey, they're not going to give me access to their equipment, but I may have a firewall in place. And that is yours, that belongs to you. And therefore you need the credentials of that piece of equipment. So you're going to make a list of all of the stuff that you kind of have. And one of the things that we're trying to just educate you about is about the cybersecurity requirements. So they are easily enough, they're becoming more and more stringent with regards to documentation. And you have to comply. So one of my pieces of advice is just advise them that as cybersecurity requirements become more and more stringent, I'm compiling all of our account information, and I need any login credentials, both user information and passwords to my accounts. Okay. If they resist, ask them why. Ask them why. Okay. And then document it. Even if it's documented between an email between you and a coworker, just make sure you've documented that, hey, I reached out to Comcast. They have this device in our building. We don't have access to it because it's the least, right? It's the least piece of equipment. So great, I have it documented, life is good. If the equipment belongs to you and you've paid for it, and the client and the vendor still refuses to give it to you, my suggestion would be to consider to let them go, fire them. Here's why. We never want your data, your documentation to be held hostage by somebody. Because if you ever decide to fire them or let them go, or you've outgrown them, or they aren't servicing, they're not providing you with the level of service that you want, we want you to be able to say, I'm not doing it. Now, there's consequences to that. So you can't just willy-nilly do that, right? You can't just say, hey, I'm gonna let them go, because they provide a specific service to you. But you need to be sure that you're dealing with vendors that have the same morals as you, right? So we want to just be cautious with regards to, if it's your information, it's your equipment, you should be able to have credentials for that equipment. And I'm not saying you're ever going to log into it, because oftentimes it's not something you're ever going to need. But if you fire them, then we need to have somebody else step in, and they're going to need those credentials. Okay, so we just want to make sure that if anything is proprietary and they're the owner, there might not be much options. Comcast is a perfect example. Spectrum is a perfect example. Your printer companies, sometimes your printer companies, if you lease your printers, sometimes they won't give you the admin credentials. We document it and we move on about our day. And anytime we have an issue, what do? We call them and they take care of it for us. That's great. It's proprietary. We're good with it. If they simply refuse to give you the information, then just consider replacing them. Come up with a plan on saying, hey, I don't understand it. I bought it. I want the credentials to log into it just for the sake of our documentation. Okay. All right, makes sense. Sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, but unfortunately you need to take control over it. Is something that's super important, and as compliancy becomes more and more stringent, it's going to be kind of a requirement. All right, so I'm going to provide you with some questions that you can ask. Okay, and hopefully we're non-threatened. We don't want to, we don't want to give them alternatives. We just want to be able to say, look, you set up this equipment or this account or this piece of software for me, and I'm looking for the login credentials. Can you provide me with that? Okay. Also, you may want to ask if there is a particular website that you have to go to access the account. The reason being is because sometimes the login accounts are not the same as what you would Google, right? AT&T is a perfect example. So this company uses AT&T as our cell phone provider. We are a business account. So when I Google AT&T login, it doesn't take me to the right portal to access my business account. So I have to go to a special portal on the business side. So it's important that I know that. So because my credentials aren't going to work if I go to the traditional AT&T website. So we want to ask, we want to make sure that we've got the right website to access the account information. And then obtain any relevant information that would be helpful if you needed to talk to somebody to troubleshoot a problem, pay an invoice, or add or remove services or features. Okay, so just kind of be thinking about if you've got a bill in front of you, the account number, does it have a PIN? Do you have that PIN documented? Contact people. Oftentimes we get a particular sales account manager or a particular tech support person that is attached to our account. We just want to know who they are. Okay. It could be the security pins or access codes. I know we kind of share when I have to have another staff member look at an account for us, I just share the pin with them so that they know, just like mentally, okay, I know that this person has access to this account now. So if something happens, I have to pull access. So I document, please document everything. Okay. And then once again, any people that actually have access to the account, it's important to document who they are. Okay. And if you start the list, which was at the very beginning of the slides, then you can kind of go back to that and say, okay, this person has this access, so that you've got it documented. Okay. All right. So you have the information. Now what? Okay. So physical documents, you're just going to secure them, fire safe location, safety deposit box. You kind of mentally know where they are. Your virtual should be in a secure location, which ultimately may be the responsibility of your vendor. And it obviously you want to back up that stuff. Okay. Now the account information, including passwords, needs to be documented. And now that you have it all, it needs to be, I would recommend a digital copy, stored in a secure folder on your computer with a password protection or encryption. All right. So having a Word document with a list of your accounts and all of their passwords is no longer acceptable. Okay. We need that. I'm not kicking the Word document. I have one. I just need to make sure that it is in a secure location and that it is password protected. Because if somebody gains access to your documents, Would you be giving them the keys to the kingdom? That's all I'm saying. And I was at a client last week, honest to God, pulled up the documents, was not password protected or encrypted, pulled it up. We were struggling with some accounts, and he had the login credentials, thank the Lord. But it was accessible on the network where, dozens of people can see and access the documents. So there wasn't a whole lot of security on there. We have since taken care of it. Appreciated and respected the fact that he had a document with all of his stuff on it. Kudos to him. It's just, it should have been a little bit more secure. Okay, especially if it truly does give a person the keys to the kingdom. If you choose to print a copy, amen to that. I have my digital copy, I have a printed copy. Please consider making sure that it's just in a secure location, so that, a sticky, a Post-it on your desk with your username and password, not acceptable anymore. Okay, don't tuck it under your keyboard. We want to make sure that any user accounts and passwords are protected. Okay, so just please make sure that you're physically putting them in a safe place, and whether it's digital, get them on a password protected folder or an encrypted location. And if you struggle with doing that, let us know. We can absolutely help you get those documents in place. Okay, all right. So we talk about who should have access. If you have another IT provider, so let me pop back up. So who should have access? So only those that need access should have it. Okay, so a Post-it note with your login credentials stuck to your monitor or under your keyboard is no longer acceptable. Don't let everyone create accounts for you. Kind of limit who is going to be allowed. If you have an employee that needs to create an account, let your admin staff do that for them. And that way you can give them the credentials and you can revoke the credentials by changing the password at any point. Okay, makes sense. Always ensure that those that do create accounts for you are doing it on your behalf. So we create accounts all the time. I do it for all of you. We do it regularly, and I have a whole team of people here that do it. But we never not have your name or your company attached to it because it belongs to you. And if you fire us, we want to be able to hand that all over and you be able to have access to it all. Okay, so make sure that you're going to have lots of people as you grow doing those accounts for you, and it's perfectly okay for them to do that. Just make sure they're doing it on your behalf. Okay, all right. Now, if CST is your IT provider, if it's us, I need all of you that are on the call to be able to ask for your DTM. It's your Detailed Technology Manual. The document contains all your credentials, accounts, systems, your inventory, and I need you to review it. Here's what we're learning. As I took a look at all your DTMs at the end of last year, in December, I realized that we're missing information. Now, I know it's information you probably have. I just need to document it in our files. And then we will compile it. Ours are encrypted and protected. And then it's yours. It belongs to you. It's just we monitor and update it for you regularly. And then we'll do it for you. That's how easy it is. And then during your technology business review or your quarterly business review, be sure to ask for a copy. We will give it up. We do not hold data or documents hostage here. So you just ask for it and then you review it every quarter or every year. And that way you've got it in place. Okay. All right. So if we are not your IT provider and you have another provider, you're going to ask them for your information. They should have it. They should have it documented and they should be willing to give it up to you. Okay. So just ask them for it. They should have some type of organizational process of how they keep your information and how they created the accounts for you. And you need a physical copy of it or a digital copy of it so that once again, if you ever run into an issue, you've got it. If you ever need to log into an account, you've got it. And if you ever fire them, you don't have to worry about, trying to get your information and having to start over. Okay. All right. So one of the things that I've added is there are lots of policies and procedures that you all should have as kind of a default. Okay. And as we talk about cybersecurity compliancy, there's some documents that if you're ever audited, that you will need to have on file somewhere. Okay, now one is your IT policy and procedures. All right, now that's a basic form. We've got a sample copy of it if you want one. It's basically what you give to all your new hires, right? This is, hey, we have an IT policy. Please don't, do things inappropriately. Don't do personal stuff. Please don't shop on business time. It's just one of those basic policies. This is behave. If you're at work, do work. Okay. The second one is a disaster recovery and preparedness plan. Now, for those of us that are in, well, the entire country at this point has unpredictable weather, whether that be ice storms, snowstorms here in upstate New York, or whether that be down south where we're dealing with, hurricanes and tornadoes and all that other stuff. We want to make sure that we have some type of plan. What happens if there's a disaster? And we do prepare those plans. You can also download some templates from the internet. So make sure you kind of have a disaster recovery and preparedness plan. If you're in a compliancy required industry, like the Department of Finance or CISA, the Cybersecurity Association, or an industry standard like an insurance or medical, you'll need it. That's part of your compliancy. And then, of course, a master service agreement. Now, let me make a comment about the master service agreement, and I know we're over on time, but the master service agreements, we will be providing you with a master service agreement. Please pay attention to the timeline of those, the terms. We do not put anybody in a long-term contract. We don't require, you want to fire us, give us 30 days. And if we want to fire you, give us 30 days. And we end the relationship. I never want to do business with somebody who doesn't want to do business with us or feels like we're not doing a good job. However, there are vendors out there that do put you in a long-term contract. So be careful of those. And just get some type of agreement that says, hey, they promised to do this, we promised to do that, and the relationship is kind of laid out. Okay, now it's time. This is the perfect opportunity for you to kind of get your documentation in line with regards to your expectations. So does anybody have any questions? Are you all feeling like you've got at least a start of where to go with regards to the physical stuff, the virtual stuff, and then the stuff that you currently don't know about? Are you feeling like you got a handle on that? Is everyone good? I appreciate everybody for taking 30 minutes. I apologize for rushing, but if nobody has any questions, obviously my information is there. You can reach out to any one of my team members if you have any questions. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you for the 30 minutes. I'll be looking for Wednesday webinars. We are going to be doing it for the entire year. So as we get better with it, we'll be sure to send out notices a little sooner. This was kind of a last minute thing for us. So be sure that you are looking for those emails and the invites. If you have any questions, please give us a call. I appreciate everybody so much. Thank you, guys.